call here. Ian Chowdhury. Let's see, Amy Contreras.
Here.
Awesome. Paul Gonzer. Kurt Morrison.
Here.
Chris Pacheco. All right, not seeing Chris just yet. Ian Chowdhury, did you join us?
Yes, I just did. Yeah.
Awesome. Great. Thank you. And actually, Paul, I think you joined us as well. Great.
Somebody needs the link resent to them.
Julie made it on. Looks like she's here.
Okay. Awesome. Great, because Julie, you're up next on my roll call list. I'm going to count it as a here, seeing you in the participant list. Sweet. Alicia Brown. All right. Lucia Brown.
Here.
Awesome. Jake Cohen, I'm present. Jamie Lewis. All right. Aileen McCallum.
Here.
Tangier Barnes, right? Joni Allen. Brian Carroll. Alan Cowgill.
Hello.
Chris Johnson. Gary Johnson.
Gary's here.
Awesome. I got Joe Levy. Did I see a note? He's going to be a little late.
Yes, he emailed saying he'd be late.
Okay. Awesome. And then Jonathan.
Yes, hey, here.
Awesome. All right. Alan, do you have a tally for us on that one?
I think I counted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, including Joe.
Okay. I think we should be set for a quorum then, if my math is right. Awesome. Well, then do we have a motion to approve the March meeting minutes?
I will motion to approve the March meeting minutes.
A second.
Awesome. All in favor?
Aye.
This
Aye.
is Julie. I'll abstain because I wasn't there, but they were very helpful. Thank you.
All right. Any opposed? All right. The minutes are approved. And with that, we will hand it over to our public comment session.
No one has signed in for the public comment.
Great. Thank you for that update, Nanina. I think with that, then Nick, we can hand it over to you for the report for DOTI leadership, assuming that's coming from you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Good to see everyone. I think we came here early. A few of the true signs of spring for the department. So our paving and street sweeping has begun as of last week on there, and that's always a very important part of maintaining both our infrastructure and as well with street sweeping our air quality in the area. I think this year we're up to 450 miles of repaving on that, and of course all of the street sweeping we can do. Relevant to this group, the sidewalk ordinance 307 stakeholder committee. We closed application process on Friday. We have about 150 applicants, so it was very heartening to see that level of interest and turnout. We're going to grind through those here for the next couple of weeks and would expect meetings to begin pretty soon here in May on there, and got the designated folks. I think we have 3 folk from the advisory board sitting on that, and then also a couple from the Mayor's Pedestrian Advisory Committee, then as well as a couple of the direct proponents, Jill Locantor and Joel Noble, and then we'll kind of fill out the rest here. So another 15 or so after that, 15 or 20. Want to try to keep it manageable on that, but yeah, we'll have more update for y'all next month on that. Hopefully we are scheduling meetings and all of that. Volume-based trash pricing, just some good news on that. We've seen recycling, the volume of recycling material go up approximately 17%. So that is over 11,000 tons that are being diverted from our landfill. So that is very good. While there's still a few operational challenges with that, if anybody has any trash trucks they'd like to sell us, we're very interested at this point. I think met a lot of the challenges here, and the program is moving forward. So good news on that. Let's see. On the 18th, and this is just if you are interested in a general public meeting about the Colfax BRT, on the 18th, there will be a public meeting at the Carla Madison Rec Center to give an update on that. And all of these, there's a couple other things I'll put more information in the chat on that as we go through. And I think, Earl, is that your microphone?
I think it might be.
Oh, it's because there's 2 Earls.
All right, you should be fine now.
Okay, there's only room for
Sorry
one.
about that.
Nope, that is all right. Two events. I'm going to talk about the first one. We've got a special guest to talk about our second one. First off is the NACTO Designing Cities Conference, and that is the National Association of City Transportation Officials. Denver is hosting this year. That will take place next month. So that is primarily for public sector employees. But if you are interested in attending, they do have a non-public sector employee kind of, I don't want to say sweepstakes, there's a better word for that, but you can apply to be able to attend that. We are also hosting a number of different workshops as a part of the conference. And if you are interested in leading a workshop or participating in a workshop, there is also some opportunities for that. And I'm going to put emails into the chat here once I'm done on who to contact if you are interested in that. Yep, I think that's it. And so the other event I wanted to talk about, we've got Sam McCrory here from Denver Streets Partnership, is the Viva Streets event. And I'm going to guess that most folks on this meeting have probably heard of that. You guys are pretty keyed in on that, but wanted to, this is something we've been working on with a number of different organizations led by Denver's Downtown Denver Partnership on here, but Mr. McCrory, Sam, is here to tell us a little bit more about that and potentially how y'all can be involved in that.
Yeah, thanks, Nick, and thanks for inviting me to this meeting. Again, hi, everyone. My name is Sam McCrory. I work for the Denver Streets Partnership. If you're not familiar with us, as Nick mentioned, he was talking about the Sidewalk 307. That was us, Denver Reserve Sidewalks, among other things. So, and this year we were hired by the Downtown Denver Partnership to help execute Viva Streets. So, I did have a quick presentation. It looks like I am disabled from sharing my screen. So if that's a possibility to share my screen, that'd be great. But basically, Viva Streets is going to be an event that's happening this summer. Again, 4 events across the summer. They're going to be May 14th, June 4th, July 9th, and August 6th from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. They are all going to be on Sunday mornings, as I mentioned. And if you're familiar with open streets, cyclovia, that kind of culture, things like that, that stays pretty constant with those kind of things. So again, I'm not sure if I can get screen sharing capabilities, but that might be helpful as well, so people can see some things, just because I have some graphics as well. But if not, that's okay.
Nanita, I think you're the boss on this, or you're not able to give Sam those privileges, are you?
Yes, I am. Let me see.
While Anita is doing that, I did want to mention one of the beautiful things about the May 14th event, and as Nick just mentioned, is it's actually the day before the NACTO conference. And so this is kind of a great way to kind of showcase Denver, not only for the NACTO conference, but to show everyone how great of a program we have here. All right, there we go. Awesome. Thank you, Anita.
Sure.
Okay. So as I mentioned, May 14th, June 4th, July 9th, August 6th, everyone mark those in your calendars right now. Again, those are all Sundays from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. The event will be completely free to participate. We're encouraging all ages, all abilities to come out and participate, walk, bike, roll, basically do whatever you like as long as it does not allow a motor powered vehicle. So e-bikes will be allowed, things like that. The Broadway and Walton will be completely car free. And I have a map on the next page to kind of show exactly where that's exactly going to be. And we're anticipating a pretty large 15 to 25,000 per event. We think with the culture here in Denver and our outdoor nature that we can really get a lot of people from all areas to attend. So Paul, I see your hands raised. I'm going to get through this really quick and then I'll get to your question. Here's our routes. Our southern terminus is Broadway at Alameda, and our northern terminus is Welton at Downing. So it's approximately 3.3 miles. As I said, the whole route will be car free. We are going to be allowing, however, cars to cross the route at high traffic roads, Colfax, 6th, ones that have higher ADTs, those kinds of things. So, and DPD officers and volunteers will be helping control those intersections to make sure everyone's safe. You can also see here that there's some kind of blue squares, purple squares, blue stars. Throughout the route, we're going to be having activity hubs, is what we're calling them. So places where there's going to be music and places to sit and water, bathrooms, those kinds of things, and activities throughout the day. So we have one in each kind of section of our route. One's going to be at Broadway and Bayard, our South Broadway section, one right at Civic Center Park in the park right there. And then one further up at 5 Points Plaza, 27th and Walton. And there'll be some additional activity areas. The folks at Curtis Park Neighbors are really excited to bring some kids activities to Sonny Lawson Park. And we're going to be having kind of an e-bike test drive area at the 9th and Broadway lot right there. So you're probably wondering, what's the whole point of this? Why are we doing this? Why did DDP want to do this project this year? And here's our main vision and goals. One of them is just bringing people together. Again, this is a huge event that we think a lot of folks from Denver are really going to enjoy, and bringing people from different backgrounds, ethnicities, different skills, abilities all together. And we did choose this route because we think it is a great opportunity to support local business, with South Broadway, Welton Street, downtown, a really great opportunity to get people and new faces into historic businesses. So, and also explore Denver neighborhoods. I think on the last slide, you see a lot of neighborhoods there that this route touches. It's about 9 or 10. So exploring those neighborhoods, getting new faces into and learning the history, things like that of those neighborhoods is really essential for us. And then as an organization like the Denver Streets Partnership and DDP, of encouraging a healthy and car-free lifestyle, and just kind of seeing what our streets can look like. A lot of us know Broadway as a street with a lot of traffic and parking and bus lanes and things like that. And we're trying to look to reimagine that on a Sunday morning. So here's how to get involved in Viva Streets. We have a couple stakeholder groups that meets monthly on the Welton, Broadway, and Central stakeholder groups. So if you live in any of those areas or know someone who lives in those areas who thinks should be good to be involved in those groups, feel free to tell them about that and put them in contact with me. Or if you know any local businesses or neighborhood groups that you think would be a good match for Viva Streets, or you have a good relationship with a business on South Broadway or something like that, feel free to put them in contact. Again, we want this event to feel really like the neighborhoods that surround it and have a great community feel there. And then the other thing is volunteer opportunities. I think there was around 25 people in this call. So that's 25 volunteers I'm adding to my list. So our website is live. I'll go to that on the next slide here. If you go to the website, vivastreetsdenver.com, and clicked on get involved, there is a live volunteer link there to sign up for one of our 4 events. And so we're going to need help again at traffic and security, as well as surveying and evaluation, and then helping set up at those hubs. So that's all I have. There's my email, sam@denverstreetspartnership.org. There's my cell phone number. Feel free to call, text if you have any questions. And then Ellen Ford over at the Downtown Denver Partnership, who I believe is at City Scout right now that they're putting on. So, but she's our project manager on this. Feel free to reach out with her at any questions. And again, as I mentioned, the Viva Streets Denver site is live. Hopefully I can quickly share over to that, see what that looks like. Yeah, hopefully we can see this all okay. But This is our website live. There's a lot of great information on here about what is Viva Streets. Basically, a lot of the stuff you heard in this meeting. So with different tabs of how to get involved with your volunteer business. So I will be quiet and answer some questions. So it looks like we do have a couple. All right, let's go to Paul first since I saw his hand first.
Hey, thanks so much. Your enthusiasm for this, Sam, is readily apparent. I think it's a real cool idea. Just one thought, because I tend to be an optimistic pessimist. I was looking at the calendar as I was listening to your conversation, reading the dates. I know the very first day, the May one, is a Sunday. The Rockies are home. And as much as I support our local team, but wish people didn't go and spend their money there so that the ownership might have to sell the team, I anticipate it'll be a beautiful day and it'll be very crowded. And so my question is, has there been collaboration with DOTI or CDOT about updating the changeable highway signs to recommend that the many thousand people coming to the Rockies game who might not be mass transiting stay off of taking Broadway as an input into the city before something very well intended becomes a source of ire to 6,000 fourth inning arriving baseball fans?
Yeah, no, that's a great thought. And someone also mentioned in the chat that's also Mother's Day as well. So that might be a question.
Cool. Of course, I remembered it was Mother's Day. Yes, of course, you were right that it's also Mother's Day.
Yeah, we are going to have, I believe, some variable messaging sign at Broadway where the route kind of turns and doglegs up to the right. But again, we're also going to rely on a lot of, I think someone actually from the Rockies is in our Viva Streets Advisory Committee as well. So that's a question I'll definitely push on to the Downtown Denver Partnership, because they're the ones who handle that steering committee. Cool. And are in those meetings with DOTI and everyone. So,
cool,
but that's
because it's a 1:10 first pitch, which obviously is kind of right in the meat of that.
Yep. Awesome. Thanks for bringing that up, Paul. Is it Aileen?
Yeah. Excuse me, Aileen. So I normally don't like to do this in this meeting, but I am going to put my Downtown Denver Partnership hat on right now to talk about two things and add to your presentation, Sam. So number one, I just wanted to help everyone understand that a big impetus and reason for the Viva Streets was it was inspired by the Downtown Denver Partnerships Urban Exploration Program that went to Mexico City last year. And about 150 public and private sector leaders went to Mexico City last year. And through the course of that experience and experiencing the ciclovia on Sundays in Mexico City, they came together and really pushed for our own experience, similar in a Denver way, but similar and inspired by the ciclovia in Mexico City. And, we're not blind to the fact that it's been going on successfully in many other cities across the United States, but just wanted to make sure everyone understood that. And it's a big passion project of mine and my job, but I love Urban X, and I think it adds a lot of inspiration to our city and the work that we can accomplish together. And then the second thing I wanted to add, and Sam, you may have said this and I missed it. I don't know, but just wanted to emphasize that there is a big press conference tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. And I actually just got the information today and I haven't been paying attention to where it is. Is it at the City and County building, Sam?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
I was actually going to throw the flyer in the chat after I got
Perfect.
presenting, but for some reason I couldn't. But yes, in front of the City County building on Bay.
I might be able to. Yeah. And so I would just encourage everyone, if you have a chance, it's at 11 o'clock tomorrow. It's going to be beautiful and gorgeous outside. So it'd be awesome to see folks supporting this big project and the press conference that will happen tomorrow. That'd be awesome. Okay, Downtown Denver Partnership hat off.
Yeah, and I saw there was a question or a comment from Julie in the chat about getting an email or a flyer to email them. Who'd be the best person to email that flyer? We do have one.
Yeah, that's just because I'm an old person and I'm on my phone today because I'm in transit and I can't figure out how to get something from my phone anywhere else.
No worries. Yeah.
But this sounds fun. This sounds like a blast.
Yeah.
Sam, send it my way and I can do it. Yeah, I can put it in there.
Awesome. Thanks, Nick.
Awesome. Any other questions for Sam?
Sam, I can also add it to our meeting minutes as well if you'd like to send anything my way.
That'd be great. Awesome. Alan, do you mind putting your email in the chat for me? Thank you. Yeah, if there's any other questions, again, I'll put my email in the chat. Again, this is sam@denverstreetpartnership.org. If there are any other questions, I'm actually going to hop off. I'm actually going to miss our conference tomorrow because I'm going to be in New Orleans for a trip. So I need to get ready for that. So thanks again for letting me be here, though.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing, Sam. Hopefully
Thank you, Sam.
you find some good street designs in NOLA.
Thanks, everyone.
Awesome. Anything else from the executive report, Nick?
Nothing else for me.
Awesome. With that, we're going to turn it over into a discussion around the 2024 DOTI budget with Earl. I just wanted to give a quick reminder to everyone that the budget is our biggest chartered item as a group to review and add input into for the department and serve as a resource for them for the budget. So a reminder of the importance that we have with this task. And with that, if you're ready, Earl, I'll hand it over to you.
All righty, yeah, just 1 second. Let me get shared. It's showing host disabled participant screen sharing. Nanita, can you help out with that?
Yes, I am on it. Give me 1
All
second.
right.
You in?
Okay, it's still showing the host disabled participant screen sharing.
Ninita, you might notice there's two Earls. The
yeah.
one he's using is the Earl Dottie CFO one.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, use the one because I'm on 2 different devices.
Give me
right.
1 second.
Okay.
Are you in now?
Let me check. All right, here we go. All right, can everyone see my screen?
Yep.
All right, very good. So just a sort of a quick pointer into sort of where we are in the dynamics around this year's budget process. So obviously we have an upcoming administration change, 1, and then 2, where we are currently is very, 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 very early in the process to where there's still quite a bit of unknowns. And so some of this information that I'm going to present today kind of talks to that, but nonetheless, there are elements of our process year over year that don't change. And so I think that to some degree, this will be educational for some, but also for others, it could be sort of rehashed in a sense. So I'll dive into this. I'd like to, in going through the agenda, financial structure and terminology, there's some things that we want to make sure that we sort of address right off the bat. And then number 2, I usually like to start these with sort of a baseline of like where the economy locally is. And I think that some of these things in relation to the budget as a whole, since so much of our budget at the city level and really with all of our sources really stem from tax revenue, which are derived from much of the economic sort of indicators. And then we'll kind of talk about high level budget development focus areas, some of the key changes as a result of this year, a general timeline, and then Denver moves everyone. And then lastly, but certainly probably one of the most important areas, how the team here could have a impact on our budget for this year, and as well as advancing items in relation to the budget as well. So financial structure and terminology. So you'll see and hear over your time, maybe you have already, the terms general fund, enterprise fund, special revenue fund, and capital improvement fund. And I think that it's important to know sort of the difference between each of those, because different parts of our budget come from many of these different source areas. So when we think of general fund, that's the primary city general fund in which or the master fund in which all of the revenue and expenses largely are recorded, as well as other special purpose items that are associated with the general fund. Enterprise fund is a self-supporting government fund or enterprise that typically, provides fee for service and other elements. And that typically is something that you will see primarily in independent municipal corporations or authorities, such as like the airport and the wastewater enterprise fund and a few others. And then the special revenue fund is money for a specific purpose going into a particular fund, and expenses associated with said purpose would then be eligible to be drawn from that. And then lastly, the capital improvement fund is, for its obvious reasons, is a fund dedicated to capital projects, equipment acquisitions, and other eligible expenses as part of a broader capital program. So economic forecast for 2023, or actually here, just one second. So, with the broader sort of economy and sort of where we are right now, and much of this actually is really outlined also in this year's budget book for additional information. But when we look at sort of the economic forecast, late last year, this year, and to a degree, heading over into 2024, there's a lot of uncertainty around many aspects of the economy, whether it be inflation, whether it be gas prices, whether it be, a potential recession and what that looks like and how deep or how shallow it'll be. But nonetheless, that those all have, as well as rising interest rates, those all have really a profound effect on typical, services, construction projects, and other parts of our business, and really set expense sort of projections and things like that off of that, based off of what we know to be sort of the case with many of these things. And so obviously, as a result of continuing heightened inflation and other cost escalation expenses, there's an element of that that's weighing on the city's budget that's over and above what we had initially projected for 2023. But still, total general fund revenues should be about 3.3% higher than 22, and with sales and use tax being 4.6%, and then property tax revenue being about 4.5% above last year's levels. Budget development process. So we have this generalized sort of timeline of the various activities that are made up as part of the process. And to keep in mind, the city's process has not yet kicked off. And so as a result of that coming over the next few weeks, we'll then have an opportunity to sort of make some minor adjustments based off of what they know to be the process, and taking into account some additional steps associated with the administration change. So I know some of you have seen this in the past, and it largely, as of now, remains sort of true to a degree, but I think that there could be an opportunity for future items that we come back and present an updated sort of timeline of activities based off of information that we should have a sense of over the next month or so as part of the process. So one of the big changes that we've made, within DOTI at least, is sort of really kind of starting our process a little bit earlier than normal, than the typical city process, to allow for more time on the front end to help teams be better prepared with justification and all of the work that really goes into making a good request, and even better request when it comes to vetting that against other city priorities. We want to make sure that as a department and as a team, we're putting our best foot forward in illustrating what it is that we need and the details around that. So next slide. So to continue on to that point that I had just made, I think by having I guess a pre-submission process that's sort of pseudo-independent of the efforts that happen at the city, it allows us to be a little bit more on our own timeline to the best that we can. And in net, it really is a win-win for departments. And I think that as we continue to sort of refine that process in subsequent years, we'll definitely be in a much better position to continually improve our process and make sure that we're really putting our best foot forward. But nonetheless, critical focus areas within priorities. So regardless of any change in administration or change in priorities year over year, there are some things that are always really certain. And these items down here on the left, pertaining to, safe, efficient delivery of essential services, and providing leadership around critical infrastructure and capital and maintenance projects, as well as consistently looking at ways to improve the customer experience, as well as community engagement. So regardless of whoever's in charge and whoever is running the ship and what the priorities are, there's a baseline of elements that those things will kind of always be really important and guide a lot of the work that we do. So Denver Moves Everyone. This is our, our long-range strategic transportation plan, that we've been working on here over the last few years. We're working really hard, and the team has done an incredible job on really bringing much of this work to fruition through by incorporating many of these elements into our ongoing capital program. Through making sure, as we have in the past thus far, really dialed in on community input and making sure that not only do we understand what the community's concerns are surrounding these areas, but we're also taking into account of asset condition and some of the more longer term things that near and long term things that we are looking to achieve to ultimately realize our vision by 2050. This next one, when we look within Denver Moves Everyone and some of the more short-term improvements in relation to these respective areas, short-term being between now and really about 2030, some of the short-term areas, and this isn't an all-inclusive list, but this is sort of the critical 80% of the things that we really want to tackle in the short term. And the detail, obviously in description here on the left, but then detail on what each of those, as much as possible, have here over on the right. And this is probably the area that, and I'll illustrate this definitely in our last slide, but this is probably one of the areas that I think the team here could have probably the most impact on providing input into, really, because these are things that are going to be done in relatively short order, and there are elements of these things that are so essential, and also that will be continually ongoing to where there's always an opportunity to sort of really weigh in on these things. And then here's the equity map and index. Obviously, within all of the work that we do, whether it be on the operating side or the capital side, really, infusing equity into everything that we are doing around planning and outlining investments in the short, near, and longer term, and making sure that we are doing extra due diligence and extra work to really make sure that the investments that we do make are done in the most equitable manner possible, in alignment with our goals and expectations. So this last slide around impact that the board can have, I think the most impact, obviously, I think the first item here, always something that's going to be something that's probably every year, around providing a memorandum outlining goals and priorities for 2024. And then towards the end of the process, towards the fall, really working to review and provide input on the proposed budget once it becomes publicly available in fall of 23. And then to the point of just community engagement and participation, really working to see what other ways and how can we work to improve how we engage with the community, not only on this particular process, the budget process, but other process or other projects as well around such as South Platte River and Tributaries Restoration Project, and many other mega projects that are coming over the near and medium term. And then within Denver Moves Everyone, I've kind of alluded to this, but the feedback and recommendations on short-term improvements, I think is one of the big areas that we could use really your feedback and recommendations on to make sure that we have a lot of those priorities and recommendations captured and making adjustments as needed. And then lastly, but definitely one of the most important things, really centering around this, this opportunity this year with the administration change, with advocating for, transportation and associated and relevant priorities within that is obviously going to be a great thing to get the work that we're doing here, as well as the things that we're trying to advocate for really on the map in a way that is positive and still going to move us in the right direction around priorities with the change over administration. So this was the last slide that I had, and then I guess we can move on to questions if there are any, which I'm sure there are likely to be plenty. So I think just one last point to follow up. I think that maybe for either next month and it really kind of depends on the timing of some of the dates in the upcoming city kickoff, and seeing what elements of particularly the timeline or other steps that will be that we can publicly share that will be involved in the process, and what that means for this particular group and how it's relevant. So I'll probably provide another mini update either next month or the month after on some of the more follow-up items. Any questions?
We have quite a bit of time for questions, so definitely feel free to ask questions here. I see one from Jonathan.
Yeah, so I'll have a few, but to start, and I know this isn't directly related to your presentation, but it got me thinking as you talk about advocating with the new mayoral candidates. The new mayors are sworn in July, which is relatively late in your process, and in fact, not just late in your process, but late in the office of budgeting's process. To what extent in the transitions have we seen before that new mayors come in and make large changes versus just sort of allowing the prior mayor's priorities to continue into the budget? In that it looks like, based on your timeline, most of the recommendations would have been made to the city CFO and things by the time the new mayor is sworn in. Do they really have an opportunity to change anything in this budget, or is their impact really the following budget?
So that's actually a really good question. And I think with this process this year, and we'll see more, we'll have more information on what this will look like tactically here over the coming months. But there will be an element of what we're already sort of doing and continuing and providing resources for that's already underway. The baseline of keeping sort of things running, as well as commitments that we've already made to the community that will be sort of part one. And then there will likely be sort of a part two process post inauguration that will allow at least a certain amount of ability for the new administration to sort of be able to weigh in on certain things and in relation to transportation in the broader budget. But we'll know, we should hopefully know a little bit more about what that looks like here in the coming weeks. So I'd hold that question probably till next week's, or not next week's, but next month's meeting update.
Okay.
Alan?
Sorry, it'd be easier if I found the unmute key. Earl, to the extent, and if it's too far upstream to comment for you or Nick, I totally understand. I know a lot of folks are interested in the new ordinance 307. Do you see any of that revenue starting to impact the budget in the fiscal year 2024?
I mean, at the current moment, based on the work that we are working on in relation to that, the short answer is possibly yes, but we don't know to what degree at this point yet. Nick, you can probably provide more context on that.
No, I think you hit the point. 24, yes, I would expect revenue in there, and because basically we need that revenue to do the work on there. This is one of the things kind of behind the scenes we have been working feverishly on, is to make sure we have systems that will allow us to kind of take on this. It's one of those things that, sure, it seems very simple on the face, but as we've gotten into it, it's like, holy smokes, this is a lot more complicated. So that was a real long answer with a lot more detail than you needed. But yes, I would be disappointed if we were not if we did not have revenue coming in 24.
Yes, the expectation currently now is yes, but as we progress through the implementation work, that'll ultimately determine what that looks like and how much.
Are you saying that you haven't come to my sidewalk and measured it with a ruler yet, Earl?
I'm saying you should probably go out and do it yourself.
Great, thank you guys for that. That's helpful.
Oh no, you're welcome, definitely. Yeah, and then that's, on that topic, as we have more information on that, we'll definitely be glad to share. But to Nick's point earlier in the meeting, we do have the broader sort of community feedback and advisory portion of sort of the work that's going to be happening around that, and making sure that we are being timely with updates and everything.
Thank you.
I had a question on kind of how the budget gets prioritized, Earl. I know we talk about the different financial structures and kind of the four main buckets, but I know that kind of with any DOT of any size, right, there's always this balance between expanding facilities and creating new projects and infrastructure versus maintenance. Is there kind of a formula we look at, or is it really based on an asset inventory, or how do we go about that in Denver's budgeting process?
So I can only speak for the way that DOTI really approaches this. Definitely as part of any budget process, especially for the city, it's, layering on department priorities, the advisory board priorities, the mayoral priorities, the city council priorities. But when it comes to the sort of transportation assets that need to some degree regular state repair, maintenance, overhaul, and ultimate replacement, those are things that in theory there's a degree of priority that comes with having that asset and investing in that asset before investing in a new said asset. But it's hard to go through here and right now, but things such as bridge condition index, for example, and many, like, for example, vehicles, age of existing fleet and things like that. All of those metrics are really taken into account to determine what the need is around investment for capital maintenance, overhaul, and sort of replacement, to make sure that assets aren't sort of, to the degree possible, falling behind on that relevant maintenance. And so we are, over the next, really over the coming year or two, really going to be working to improve our enterprise asset management framework around how we do that, to better use data to drive decision-making around what that looks like. So more to come on that.
Okay. I guess one, and I may be getting way too far into the weeds given what we know about the budget, but I think, particularly when we talk about certain new types of facilities, whether they be transit-only lanes or bike facilities, I think we've heard a lot of feedback that, something like a bollard or kind of the rubber curbs that have gone in, for the project, they might be funded in the original project, but they don't quite get maintained. Say the 23rd bridge, I know kind of constant feedback that the bollards are missing from that bridge. Is that something that gets funded in the creation of that project that we fund, knowing that, bollards might get knocked off? Is that a maintenance budget? I guess what I'm trying to get an understanding of is, obviously some of that's experimentation and in the planning stage and not budget issue, but trying to get an understanding if there needs to be more push from this team to look at more permanent solutions for protecting that infrastructure rather than say a white plastic bollard, but maybe, like a concrete planter or something that, some other cities have looked at as more substantial infrastructure. And I know that that's, at the end of the day, that's ultimately a budgeting conversation. So curious if we should be thinking about that either as a maintenance item or that's as part of the funding for the project.
That is, there are so many variables in those types of decisions and investments and things like that. If the bollards are included within the scope of the capital project, then at the very base, you would have bollards when said project is done. What kind depends. And the traffic engineers and the planners and the project managers that are on the ground work to determine what that looks like, right? So that's probably a little bit more in the weeds for this discussion, but I think that definitely it's something that could probably warrant some sort of follow-up. Nick, do you have any further info?
Yeah, and just to add to what Earl said, yeah, I mean, when that goes in, when a project is selected and built, the budget itself, that project budget doesn't necessarily have the ongoing maintenance, but that project is then included in our ongoing maintenance expectations around there. And just to not to get too into it, but your talk of the bollards, like, yeah, we are well aware. We have had a lot of trouble. You can keep those up for about 45 seconds and someone comes and mows them down on there. So I know they've been trying some different treatments out there, some different techniques on there, but goodness, yeah, that is that and traffic signals getting whacked. That is a constant struggle on there. But as those get built, they get built into our overall maintenance strategy. So it's all contained in there.
Yeah. I think, sorry, appreciate that, Nick and Earl. Secondary question here that's a little unrelated, but I think when we've reviewed budgets in the past for the department, I think it's easy to make it look like the department's always getting more resources, but I think when we break it out line by line item, it's actually less clear to me that this department is getting, well, either consistently funded, actually even at the same level for its goals. And I guess part of the thing that's a little confusing to me about that is things like improvements to I think libraries and city facilities have been included in the DOTI budget, if I'm not mistaken, and kind of curious how we work on our prioritization goals with that being in the DOTI budget and how to like have real conversations around how we get DOTI more resources.
Nick, you're muted.
We can't hear you, Nick.
Yeah.
Let's try that again. I'll leave off the little joke on there. Why that is in our budget is because we build those buildings. That's part of our charge for the city on there. It doesn't necessarily, having that in there doesn't necessarily take away from kind of the resources that are coming to us. It's more, and Earl, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm getting out over my skis here. That's more of kind of an accounting, since we will be building it, that funding goes into our budget on there, but it doesn't necessarily mean that budget, it's hard to say. It's all one big pot out there, but you shouldn't see that as that a priority was made. Do we do bike lanes or libraries? I mean, at a very high level, yes, of course, that's what happens, but more from an accounting standpoint, that's why those numbers come in our budget.
Yeah, well, that, in addition to that, DOTI has a construction charter in a way that many other city departments don't. So in order for said asset, let's say library in this example, to be built, that budget is, from an accounting perspective, accounted for in DOTI's budget, because DOTI is the entity that's constructing that on behalf of, say, the library. And the same could be said for police, fire, other parks, other sort of city departments. And so that's, I mean, it's difficult to sort of know because it's all in one big pot, but in general, that's not money being taken away from DOTI to, say, build a library, if that makes sense.
It is included in DOTI's final number though, right? I think that's where I'm struggling, like year to year when we look at, I know that's not really maybe the fairest way to analyze a budget is just the total net number at the bottom. But I want to make sure that if, next year's budget says DOTI got 7% more funding, it doesn't just mean that police station 6 got thrown in. And that we can make sure that, I guess, is there a good way for, maybe my real question is there a good way for us as a board to kind of analyze that from year to year and kind of net out some of those other city priorities that are maybe DOTI's charge, but not like key, they are key DOTI projects. I don't know what I mean here, but like key transportation and infrastructure projects.
So that's there's a long answer to that question that probably would be worthy of an offline discussion.
Okay, fair enough. Chris Johnson, did I see your hand raised?
Yeah, thank you. This probably isn't for Mr. Earl or other DOTI, but maybe rather Alan. You did ask us to put together, some first strike funding priorities and ideas for this conversation. When is it appropriate for us to share those ideas, and what is your expectation that those will be considered in this 24 budget?
I don't think I heard the first part of this question.
Yeah, could you repeat that, Chris? You broke up there at the beginning part of your question.
Yeah, this 10G stuff is really worth all of the hype and crap in my front yard. So my question is, Alan, you gave us an opportunity to just jot down some first blush ideas for priorities for the DOTI budget. When is it appropriate for us to share those with DOTI, and what is our group expectation that those will be included in some form, or at least looked at seriously? Because this whole conversation this board's had this before, and we missed the opportunity to really influence what projects DOTI was working on. And I'm going to be seething if it happens another year in a row. And so I just want to know, what is our expectation for DOTI putting in some of our ideas and really considering them? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I appreciate that. So I think number one, Earl and I were emailing a little bit earlier today. We've got till May to kind of give them our May meeting to give them a final list. I think the draft that we have going here, and I'll put it in the chat just so everybody can kind of see the rough draft. I think this is a really good start to kind of what people are interested in. I think the Earl and Nick have given us some good guidance that looking at DOTI's existing short-term list of projects is really the best menu for us to order off of. In other words, like that's where we can give the most input coming up based on all the Denver moves everyone 2050 planning that we've had so far, as opposed to ordering off the menu, so to speak, and that's a lot less likely to be implemented. So I think really our next steps are sharing, having a conversation as a budget committee about this, and everyone will be welcome to that conversation, and we'll have a meeting here in the coming weeks. I'll email out a time to everybody, so that'll be a chance for folks that want to contribute and have a more detailed conversation. And then we'll meet as a group, Chris, in May, and eventually and actually vote on it, like, hey, this is what I propose, are there any amendments to this letter? Great. And that's when we'll officially send it over. Does that kind of answer your question from our internal perspective, Christopher?
Well, of course, right as you started answering that question, my internet died, but I heard the end of it, and because I called in from my phone. So I guess I apologize for that. It's on my end. But so what you're saying is the process that you've laid out that I heard of in the last part of your answer is aligned with still having influence in the DOTI budget process.
Yeah,
we're not late to the game by waiting until, I think you said May.
Yeah, Earl, is that a fair statement still?
Can you repeat that last part again? I'm sorry.
Yeah, the gist of it is we can give you our final letter of all our recommendations and vote on that at our next May meeting. Is that still a fair statement based on our email exchanges from earlier today?
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Yep.
And then just for my edification, what happens at that step, Earl?
Once we have the letter and recommendations, I guess the initial sort of step really is to determine how that lines up with what we already have outlined, and then making some, if it already is lined up beyond within that, then there's not a whole lot of changes that would need to be made. But if there are some minor tweaks that need to be made, I will get with the project delivery team and all of the various teams within that, or the relevant teams within that particular within the particular ask, and then see if and work to get changes incorporated if possible.
Okay,
Nick,
so
any other?
We're hoping that our ideas align with what you've already outlined in the major projects and initiatives, which I think this board has seen and reviewed. I can tell you that there are ideas and initiatives that the advisory board is going to put forward.
Sorry, Chris, we're having trouble hearing you.
Wow.
You might have to do the good old holding your phone up higher in the sky.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, that's better.
Okay, so I know that there are what.
Sorry, Christopher, I'm really sorry. We're only able to hear about every fifth word that you're saying right now. We might have to wait to either have better reception or maybe you could type any questions in the text.
I'd like to know what we need to do to actually have some action. Thank you.
Yeah, someone suggested maybe turning off your camera. That might help.
Okay. Okay, how's that? Is that increased my bandwidth?
It seems like it.
Oh, great. So outliers, they're not on the outline. What is the process then, Earl, for having those considered and working those into the 24 budget?
And Earl, it might be helpful if you gave just a real high level, like where, the internal staff is submitting theirs through this week, kind of then the process, where it's within DOTI, that'll be that May period. And then when it starts to go outside of DOTI into our budget office, and of course to the mayor, and then of course to city council, that might help as far as timelines go, just to kind of allay some concerns that this cake is baked on here.
Right. Yeah, I think that, again, timelines will get a better sense of what that looks like here in the coming weeks. But I think the May timeline is a really good sweet spot because it's really, to a large degree, before we make the final submission to the Department of Finance. And so the ability to make some potential changes it's there to a degree, and it's not anything that's fully baked by the time we receive these recommendations. So I guess we would have to see sort of what the recommendations are and how much effort it would take to make changes and sort of work from there. Because if there are minor changes around the edges that's only needed because the vast majority of things sort of our priorities line up, then I don't think that it's going to be a hard ask to do and make some small changes. But if we're looking at a wholesale sort of redesign of items that as a result of the feedback that's received, then that's a whole separate discussion. So it's kind of a case by case. It's hard to know from right now, based on the scope of recommendations, how much work would be needed based off of what we have right now, if that makes any sense.
Sure. So I guess the final question is, once it goes to the Finance Committee, is that the more or less final budget that DOTI is proposing?
You said once it goes to.
Go ahead.
Oh no, you go ahead.
I was going to say, so ultimately, and this has always been kind of the challenge with this is not DOTI's budget. This is the mayor's budget in this city. Then the mayor then presents it to city council. City council reviews, amends, approves on that. And so kind of to your question, yes, once it leaves our theoretical hands and moves on to the city's finance department and moves on to the mayor's office, then yes, while we certainly engage with them, but we can't go in at that point. We've kind of given our contribution to the mayor's budget on there. A lot of back and forth, things like that. But that's why we want to get this input in now, May, when DOTI has its most control over the process. Because once it goes beyond that, it's theoretically out of our hands, beyond just kind of the engagement as they lay out the mayor's budget for the entire executive branch.
Yeah, the further we get away from that, the less control we have over it. So the May timeline, like I had mentioned before, is probably the sweet spot on us being able to really make some changes in alignment with priorities. And I think that, and then one last point on that, I think that if there's anything that could be changed during May and we are able to do that, I think that that is it serves as a really nice, strong selling point to the fact that these are priorities outlined not only by DOTI, but also by our advisory board, who we work with month in and month out to help prioritize upcoming priorities. And so definitely seeing that input has been garnered from the advisory board, representative of the community, is definitely a good thing as the process moves down the line and further away from DOTI, if that makes sense.
Sure. Okay. So thank you very much. And I guess our budget committee will be working toward a hard deadline to get information to you. And then we'll discuss a timeline for response and discussion.
All righty. Gary, do you have a question?
Yes. Listening to this kind of all this conversation, it has occurred to me that a kind of a step-by-step filtered approach to understanding the magnitude of the budget discussion is needed, at least from my perspective. And when I say that, I mean, early, you made a nice presentation on the number of funds that contribute to the overall budget. What wasn't mentioned is exactly what the numbers are. And, you know, are we talking $5? Or are we talking 5 billion? I think, and I'm exaggerating for a point. If it's $5, we've got very little input because you don't have enough money to do what you need to do. But if it's considerably more than that, then there is some discretion in the application of funds. So the first thing to understand is what is the expectation for funding? Then that creates the overall budget. How much of that budget is spent on the major elements such as staff? What's in the new construction? What's into maintenance? What's into vehicle inventory? You mentioned the word assets a number of times. I think that's critically important for the board, the advisory board, to understand the value of the assets that your department is dealing with. It is incredible. The other thing that I've kind of come to understand is that there are multiple layers of input to this, and there are multiple policy statements that are on the boards. Safe streets, Vision Zero, you know, Denver moves everybody. There's so many different pieces that have to be considered in making some of these decisions. It would be helpful for me to know what are the musts in terms of new construction, what are the musts and what are committed dollars versus what are discretionary dollars. Again, as an illustration, if your committed dollars is 99% of your budget, then the advisory board's hands are tied because you only got 0.5% to deal with in terms of discretionary and or realigning priorities. The same thing with maintenance. Is there something that absolutely has to be done versus would be nice to do in terms of maintenance? So if we had an overview of that from you or DOTI in some degree to kind of lead us along the path of go from the grand picture overall, giving an overview and then be able to filter it down into the smaller compartments, that would be certainly helpful for me. And I don't know about the rest of the board, but I was completely overwhelmed last year. Of course, it was the first time I looked at such a thing, but completely overwhelmed with DOTI's budget presentation. So I didn't know where I could input. So that may help the budget committee to be a little bit more focused and or understand where they could contribute and not contribute. And that's all I got.
That's very fair. I think to sort of break that down into a few different buckets. On one end, the current size of DOTI's 23 budget and years prior is within the current budget book. And so I think that is probably one of the starting points for at least from a financials perspective on those various funds. But when it comes to the nature of what sort of bucket do we have to play with for this upcoming year, that's still to be determined. And so I can't give you what I don't have in that sense, because that hasn't, and typically usually doesn't, in many ways, for many categories, is not made available. But nonetheless, I think that there are many aspects of what you did just say that I think that could be sort of brought forth within the current context of the current process.
Yeah, and I think it would help us, which in turn helps you, if we knew some of the magnitude of those numbers. If you don't know what the budget is for next year, you've got to have some sort of goal or some sort of expectation. And so it would be nice to know what part of that overall budget is questionable versus what is what is fully expected. Because
So,
I mean, there's so many different places you get money.
yeah, absolutely. And this speaks back to the point, one of the points that both Nick and I made here earlier is, DOTI's budget is one part of the city's overall budget, right? And so it's important to note that, within sort of the development process this early, there's a large swath of those, sort of projected budget numbers or figures that we just don't have right now. And that's just part of where we are and how early we are currently within the process. And so as the year progresses along and as estimates are refined as we receive or as the Department of Finance receives information, then much of that can be determined. And so when we make our submission to the Department of Finance, and then that then progresses down the line to the mayor's office and other relevant teams, that's part of the further we get away from it, the more it's sort of out of our hands. And so I think, to my point, finding some sort of balance around that, I think is something that, and what that looks like could be definitely, I guess, explored based on the information we have now. Nick, do you have any other commentary on that?
I was just gonna say, to your point, Earl, though, we can, we can provide a much more detailed line item budget that I think gives you scope. Now, I don't know when the revenue projections come out, typically they're gonna wait as long as they can to feel as confident as they can for what they think the overall budget should be. Of course, we already have the wrinkle we've talked about with, a new mayor coming in on the heels of this, as this budget is being developed on there. But I think we can certainly come up, kind of dive in. I'm just looking through our 22 budget here on there, and it's certainly not my favorite thing to look at that level of detail on numbers. That's why I'm glad I work with Earl on there. But I think we can give you something that gives you some maybe it's a little easier to read than this, but gives you really an idea of the scope we're talking about here. That's what I'm hearing.
And I think that could be something that, to Jake's point, that's something, in historical context of, sort of DOTI's budget, or progressively knowing year over year how much, the budget's either going up or down, and subtracting out some of those variables that we've discussed. I think much of that could be accomplished as part of that as well.
Great. Alan?
Yeah, I think one thing one thing for you, Gary, Zach's recap back from October, November, I can't remember exactly when it was, but I think was a good outline with some of the specific numbers. If you don't feel like reading all 200 pages of the document, I think that was the hit on some of the high level stuff that's still posted on YouTube, I think. But Earl, Nick, I think one thing I'm kind of hearing indirectly from Chris is it might be nice to have some kind of a feedback loop. I recognize that once we send it to you all, there's a lot of confidentiality because it is effectively the mayor's budget, right? But maybe if there's, if you guys can look at the draft of what we have now that I posted in the link, if you have any general feedback that you want to put in May, when we meet again, that might be helpful. Just like, oh yeah, this is a great idea, but this is outside the scope of what we can have an impact on the budget and things like that. Or yeah, we'll definitely take these things in consideration. Or even in September, when it does become public again, if we can have some kind of a feedback loop then of saying like, hey, we heard that you said this and we tried to do this in the budget or something along those lines.
For sure, Alan.
Yeah. Thanks, Alan.
And the other thing I just wanted to mention is, do we ever have a breakout of budget by equity area of showing like, hey, this is the dollar volume of projects that have gone to neighborhoods like GES and Westwood or wherever else, or even showing like, hey, this is how much we put into these. I think that would be kind of interesting too. And last feedback item, sorry, I'm throwing a lot of stuff at you guys, is would we
Thumbs up on
consider
that one. Yeah.
Great, awesome. Will we consider receiving feedback from the Mayor's Pedestrian Advisory Committee and the Mayor's Bicycle Advisory Committee on this as well, as we kind of go into this process?
That I would defer to the committee or to the board on how you would like to engage with them on there. You know, we certainly have a formal process with y'all on there, but I'd defer to y'all if you think that was helpful. And I mean, we're not going to throw it in the trash when we get it by any means on there. So I would just defer to the board on how they think that should be best integrated.
And Jonathan, Jake, the rest of the board, I would open up to us. I would submit as a suggestion, maybe we welcome a letter from them if they'd like to participate. And we add that as an addendum to the letter that we send to DOTI, just so their input can be heard. And that way we don't have to have 6 different meetings over the process of this.
Yeah. Do they, I actually don't know, do they submit a separate letter to the board usually, or sorry, to the mayor usually? I know they are like advising the mayor and we advise the department, and I would obviously like to cross collaborate there, but not sure their normal process either.
We can check in with them. I think in the
Okay.
past, they have done letters in the past, but I'm happy to connect with them. And see what
But
their-
yes, if they send us a letter, I'd love to add it.
Yeah.
Be my
For
perspective.
sure.
Right. Any final questions here? Have a couple minutes remaining. All right, I am not seeing any. So with that, thank you, Earl. We will be excited to talk to you again in May. And then from here, I think we could shift over to I-25 and Broadway update. David, I see you talking too, and we're having the same mic issue with you. You look off mute, but we can't hear you.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes, I am.
Okay, good deal. I'll just be here supporting Nemo.
No
It might
pressure,
be
Nemo.
because you have 2 different devices on, Dave. Are you signed on in 2 different? No? Okay.
Does it help that we're all watching you really intently, Nemo? Good. Good.
We actually have you signed on as David. I don't know if you're on
Oh,
the device of
interesting.
his.
I signed on as because he sent me the link. So maybe, and Nanita, you could send me another Zoom link. I'll sign off and then I'll come back on. Does that work?
No, it's fine. I'm gonna make you both the
Oh.
co-host.
Okay. And then just know my name is Jennifer Hillhouse. Still don't have you.
Give me 1 second.
We're making you work hard on this call, Nanita.
Let me know when you're in.
Not yet.
No, I made both David.
We
Jen's
might have
idea may be
one,
that
David.
Yeah, I think because he's forwarded me the link. So Nanita, would it be possible for you to send me a new panelist link?
At
Just
this
email it to me.
point, I can try. Let me try. Oh, I don't think I can. Let me try.
All right, I'll sign off so Dave can get us started. And I'll
Okay.
be back. Thanks.
Oh no.
Dave, do you have a cell phone or smartphone you might be able to try to hop on with the link from?
Are you on Chris Johnson's Wi-Fi?
Can anyone hear David? I
No.
can't.
Is that your cell phone ends in 9979? Ninita, it looks like he's in the attendees. If you might be able to promote that cell phone to a panelist.
Okay. David, I just moved it to the panelists. Let me know what.
Nanita, is it possible to hit that cell phone as well in the attendee list?
And the last thing I was going to suggest is Nemo, get out and get back in.
Yeah, because I moved both the cell phone and
Okay.
must be really sunny out there, huh? Everybody having issues.
Team, can you hear me now?
Yay!
Yeah. Good. Can anybody speak to me? Because I may not be able to hear you.
We can hear you fine.
Can you hear us?
I have no audio. So.
Oh, you can't hear us. Okay.
I will. You want me to just go and then?
Questions in the chat?
All right, this will be odd, but I will just go. Apologies for the technical difficulties. I'm so sorry, team. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. I guess, can I get a thumbs up if you can see my screen? Okay, thank you. Great. Okay, well, thank you so much for inviting us to be here today. You did get to see Jen Hillhouse. She's our Director of Transportation Mobility Planning on our transportation team. I'm the Deputy City Engineer. I oversee all of our transportation works in the capital space. And so that's why we are both here today. We have spoken to you before, and so today, the focus of the conversation was going to be around the project background, just to set, again, level set the context very, very quickly, talk about our current project updates. We'll talk about the future phase of the project. We'll talk about how we have been addressing community concerns, and of course, conversation area. Hopefully Jen and Nick will be able to help me then during that period of the conversation. So briefly, I did want to revisit the project background and give some context against that. We all have the same place of understanding. This map on the right articulates kind of the entire vicinity area around the project. The black square highlights roughly the project area itself. And then the reason why I have showed this graphic is to demonstrate that this project fits within, of course, an entire neighborhood, an entire transportation network, and we consider all of these things together at large. So this slide in general talks about all of the overall improvements that the project will provide. So I'll just read the box at the top real quick. The City and County of Denver is redesigning the interchange of I-25 and Broadway. The improvements aim to create a safe and efficient area for all transportation modes, pedestrians, bicycle, transit, and automobile. So that's important because we're not one mode centric. We are all mode centric, and I think you'll see that throughout this conversation. So the project is aimed to ease congestion on Broadway and Lincoln, focus specifically on crashes. We've had a number of crash profiles along this corridor and wanted to address that. We have bike and pedestrian connectivity in the area. We improve our access to the RTD station. That's a huge part of this project. And then of course we accommodate our economic development. So that's kind of at large, the very big parts of the project. Honing in on that project, speaking specifically to our safety and mobility focus. So this is a new map. We've changed the orientation on you. Unfortunately, apologies for that. North is to the left. And so you see Broadway and Lincoln going left and right, but it's the same project area. So this map articulates a little bit of some of the mobility and safety focused improvements. So we have a number of multi-use paths and sidewalks that are being upgraded as part of the project. We have reduced the number of our conflict zones and confusion associated particularly in the Kentucky area and the on-ramp. We've eliminated an intersection, extension of the Broadway Bikeway from the north, signal retiming with focus on, again, safety and providing all modes of transportation access across all streets, and then improved lighting and security and other amenities at the RTD station. So we often talk about, what are the things we're doing with the project, but sometimes we forget to have the conversation around like why, what's the benefit around doing these things. So I wanted to bring this slide in, which illustrates our project success factors. And these are the things that we would say we're driving towards with this project that we want to achieve in order to have results of a successful project. And I've bucketed them into kind of 5 core areas: improved safety, enhanced multimodal connectivity, supporting neighborhood vitality, improving access to and from the station, and then fostering economic development. These bullets, I'm not going to read them all, but generally are highlighted originally in the environmental assessment from the project, and then have been maintained throughout the project as kind of focus areas for the project to make sure that we maintain that original intent. So rolling into a project update now, we've got a number of phases of the project. So forgive me a little bit for using that terminology, but phase 1 was recently already constructed, finished in 2021. Phase 1 of the project is highlighted. There's a little blow up in the bottom of the slide. Again, I've changed the orientation on you. I apologize, but it helps us to focus in on what phase 1 included. It's the purple areas, not the red. And phase 1 was a focus on getting exposition upgraded to accommodate a north entrance into the RTD station. And so we have that improved Exposition Avenue. We have new signals at Broadway and Lincoln, and then a number of multimodal improvements in drainage, landscaping, lighting, and parking along Exposition. All of that is kind of precursor work setting up for the next phase. On the right side of the screen, you'll see some photos that highlight the finished product. And if you were to go and look at, let's say like a Google image from a couple of years ago to today, it's a greatly improved facility for all users. So then we go to the phase 2. Phase 2 is the large portion of the remainder of the project. So that is all the things in the red. And phase 2 is currently in development. So we are just now finishing our design for the entire segment of, the entire phase 2 portion of work. So generally speaking, just to summarize this, I know there's a lot on the slide. I apologize for that, but I think it's helpful to be able to articulate all the things so that we're clear. It does construct a new Bannock Street to the south from the upgraded Exposition Avenue for that new entrance into the station, replacing the old Ohio entrance, which is going to be a much improved entrance for all users, especially for our RTD transit vehicles. Realigns Kentucky Avenue on the south end of the project, the right side of the map there, for again improved access to the station. And we have multimodal access along Kentucky, which we don't have today. Replaces that on-ramp with a new bridge that goes over Broadway. And then there are a number of other reconfiguration elements that support the entire project. And so that's kind of this phase at large. And I'll talk just a little bit about like what's next with that in this slide. So this is a timeline that does a little bit of reminder of the work to date. So you'll see, you know, this all started in 2008 with our South Broadway EA. And then there was some work of reconstruction of South Broadway from Kentucky to Arizona in 2017. The phase 1 project exposition, I think that was actually 2021, not 2020 when it finished, but that was phase 1. Then, oh yeah, my bad. I see that it says 2021. Then we had some continued work on phase 2 of the design and the reevaluation of the environmental work. And then we are now getting ready to move forward with what we're calling construction package 1 and phase 2. So the construction package is being broken, the construction work is being broken into 2 packages. And that is for a couple of reasons. One is to help us accelerate the work a little bit so that we can take care of more complicated back-end work. In the meantime, we're beginning on the early parts of the project, and then also it helps us to phase the work just a little bit better. So the construction right now is anticipated to begin in May of 2023 and run through the end of 2025. I mentioned we have a number of terms that we use to talk about the phasing of the project. Here's yet another term. Segment 4, that is a proper term, so I'm sticking with it, but effectively it's in reference to a future phase of the project, which refers to the on-ramp up near Lincoln that this current project is not addressing. Now, I'll mention that this part of the project is still committed and required as part of the environmental assessment. So that it still exists. However, we've heard tremendous feedback from the community, from advocates, and DOTI is currently working with state and federal partners to abandon that segment 4, if at all possible. DOTI, that does the abandonment of that work does align with DOTI's values. To support the neighborhood and not to create additional impacts. So we're going to do everything we can to try to abandon that work. And we've thus far heard very positive feedback, but of course, that is not official at this point. On top of that referenced community input, we've of course heard a lot of other input, which has been brought to us through a number of forums. We have worked with several organizations, including the neighborhood organizations, to hear that feedback very directly. And if I was to, so there's way too much to articulate all of it. However, I can summarize that feedback in these bullets. And I think the feedback is maybe articulated in this way. Overall, pedestrian safety and transit access is important, and that the original project has not been inclusive enough and considerate enough in that space. Specifically for those walking, riding, and rolling, and connectivity to the existing neighborhood. There's been concern about the number of lanes and ramps that have to be crossed from the neighborhood to get to the station area. And then specifically pedestrian protection at the intersection of Lincoln and Ohio. Also, there's been a lot of concern that this project is aimed is aimed as being a project priority for highway expansion, and that it will induce traffic and increase pollution, and that there would be a significant impact to homes, especially as it relates to segment 4. And so we have we have heard that feedback very loud and clear. And so, as I mentioned, we've been working with the neighborhood organization, in particular, the West Wash Park Neighborhood Organization, to be responsive to those comments. And so this map there's a lot on it, but what I wanted to show was on the left side is kind of like again, going back to that overarching viewpoint of the vicinity. This map articulates items that were called out specifically by the community and that we looked at adding and improving to the project, and in fact have accepted these revisions. And so I won't go into this on this map, but I do have this slide which summarizes these improvements. And so I'll read them, but what I did is I highlighted in bold the recommended action, and then in underline on each bullet, then you'll see kind of like the therefore why, what you get out of that improvement. So we have, at the corner of Broadway now, how a reduction in the radius of the curb to decrease speeds. We have an addition of an east-west pedestrian crossing to increase ped safety. We have an addition of multi-use paths to increase mobility. We have a removal of a northbound lane to allow for a shorter crossing distance. We reduce the number of left turn lanes from Broadway to Kentucky to provide a pedestrian refuge area. We have a reduction in the radius of a curb to decrease speeds. We provide solid white lines to improve lane visibility. And we have a reset and replace of signs and install of supplemental signs to help make drivers more aware of the dedicated northbound left turn lane that drops north of Exposition. And I'll maybe just make one more comment. I do have an image up in the top right corner of the slide that just shows the West Park Neighborhood Association website with kind of a label of good news. I certainly don't want to speak on their behalf, and I certainly don't want to make this any more than it is, but I hope that is a representation that we are on a good path, working with the community to hear the feedback, and have made a number of improvements and are currently working on implementing these improvements into the design, which will then make their way into the construction, to be reflective of the community's feedback and really help this project a better project for everybody. And so I'm going to close out my part of the conversation here to talk about, just a reminder, reiterate those next steps. So the construction of the major intersection improvements phase 2 is set to begin in the next couple of months and run through the end of 2025 or possibly early 2026. And then also DOTI will be continuing to work with our state and federal partners to explore the option of abandoning segment 4. So with that, and with the recognition that I, for some reason, can't hear you, thank you for bearing with me in that conversation. Nick, I'm asking if you could please help moderate the questions and answers from here, and I'll do my best where I can.
So it would be helpful if folks are able to, probably easiest is to put questions in the chat if they're doable. Otherwise, we'll have to. I know, Jen, you've made it back on, correct?
Yes, I'm here.
All right, let's give it a shot. Jake, I see your hand.
All right. Type or speak.
Why don't we speak. I have a lot of confidence.
Okay.
in him. Much more than Dave's technical abilities, that's for sure.
Perfect. I have a couple questions. Just want to clarify some things from the press release and even this West Wash Park screenshot. In that original map, there were some details that aren't in this presentation. Particularly noted that the raised crosswalk is not on the map in this slide. Has that been removed?
No, that has not been removed. So we, there was an additional ask of a raised crosswalk from Ohio onto the on-ramp going southbound. That's something that we're still looking into and working with the state. But the crosswalk that was, coming southbound on South Broadway for the northbound ramp. I wonder, Nemo, if you can if he could go back to that map. I think that would help us, but it's the on-ramp off of Broadway that the raised crosswalk exists and will move forward.
Yeah, the one that like tucks under basically.
Yes.
Hopefully that's somewhat of the engineering terminology.
And now we can't hear you again, Dave.
Can't hear you now. Dang.
You only have one shot.
Okay.
Yes, that raised crosswalk exists.
Okay, and then there was
and I might be able to pull it up if I have sharing. Oh, here he goes. Something for a different one. But okay, so
I think this is the old one, right?
yeah, and there's a lot of iteration as we continue to work with community. But that intersection at Ohio and Broadway, you see the on-ramp coming on, like just below G, that's where the raised crosswalk exists. And what we're working on is the one at Ohio to southbound on-ramp. So maybe more to come. Absolutely, one is included.
Okay. And then I know, and sorry, I might be diving way too deep into the details here, but I know that on the shared use paths that have been added, they were originally listed as 10 to 12 feet wide. Those have been also not part of this map. I assume those are also staying at.
Yes,
Okay.
they're all staying in. And so where we can get 12 feet, where we've purchased the right of way and we can fit 12 feet, we will. So that's like on the east side of Broadway, great opportunity along Ohio. We'll be able to get that 12 feet. We added an additional sidewalk on Kentucky where initially it was only one on one side of the street. So minimum of 10, and we'll work to get 12 where right of way exists.
Okay. And then Jennifer, I might sound like a broken record here. I asked this in our fall meeting about this project, but I just want to revisit the topic because I'm not sure I understand it still. So if I'm traveling southbound in the Broadway cycle track, right, that is our flagship cycling facility, and I want to go to East Tennessee, do I just have a free-for-all now of like 4 or 5 multi-use paths, or is there a preferred route there?
So I think our objective here is to provide lots of options. So I think you have options. The one that I would take is that if you're heading southbound on Broadway, you would cross over either at Exposition or Ohio and get on the east side of Broadway. This is where we can get a really great cycle track in the future because we have the space. So this project won't build it, but it will set us up for future success there. And then you could get onto Tennessee. Now, if you were going to go to Vanderbilt Park and you were already heading to the west, you could stay on that multi-use path on the west side of Broadway. But to your point, you are crossing at a controlled crossing. All of these would be controlled, but you are crossing over that ramp, raised crosswalk. So that helps. And then underneath the highway, then you're crossing Kentucky and then you're on your way. So multiple ways to navigate, but the most high comfort would be to get back on the east side of Broadway.
So is that, so sorry, east side of Broadway, meaning that I'd stay on the cycle track side and cross over to the Lincoln side before it rejoins into Broadway?
So so you're coming down South Broadway, you hit Exposition, right? Is
Mhm.
that we're tracking? And then you would continue down on the east side of Broadway, go see these intersection improvements. So those are all controlled. And then you could continue on southbound Broadway on the east side of Broadway, because that you're gonna have a really wide space. But you could still do that. You could continue to stay on the west side of Broadway. There will be infrastructure. It's just gonna narrow and maybe not be as wide as what we'll have on the east side of Broadway.
Okay. And so those will have then cycle lights on them too then, or?
That I would have to check into if we have bike signals and where we have those. That's a good point. I will look into that.
Yeah. All right. Just with this being a key bicycle facility,
Yeah,
I just
agreed.
wanna make sure I understand that routing.
Yes, yeah, no, it's really important. We agree.
All right. Other questions from the board? Sorry for dominating so much of that early time. Oh, sorry. I'm seeing it from the in the chat now. If you have anything, looks like a question from Aileen. Jen, can you share more information about the space being saved for a future protected bike lane?
Yes, so on the east side of Broadway, underneath the highway there, we have a huge amount of space. And then we're closing many of the intersections that exist. So that on-ramp that exists today to go on to southbound I-25 will be closed, right? We're coming underneath the highway. And so a lot of great opportunity there. And then working, to continue along, as well as how we start to make these connections into gates. Really important. We have lots of PED bridges that are crossing not only the Platte, but also, getting you over to Vanderbilt. And that's where we would be able to, push that user. So really the space is there. We would have to come back with additional infrastructure to really make it. So the painting, the signage, potential signalization, to really make that a true cycle track. But the grade separation, the curb is where we need it. And we have the space behind curb to get to a non-precluded, kind of condition there.
What are the options for getting that funded? And I mean, reasonably, how long are we talking about?
Yes, so it is, included in vision. I don't know the priority. I'd have to get back to you, but you would still be able to use it. So formalizing it, right, is one thing. The space will be there, and when we were out there, we saw many bikes using that. That's how they'd like to travel. So on prioritization and phasing of like, when would we go after the funding? And then do we get the funding? Right. I could get back to you, Aileen, on exactly what that looks like in our 6-year plan.
Yeah, it's just, don't worry about getting back to me. It's just something I'm asking. I love hearing these plans, but I think it's always really important to have a sense of, realistically, how do some of these ideas get funded, even if, we've made it easy for it to be funded by creating space.
Yeah, agreed.
Maybe to pile on Aileen's comment, with this, I'm working off memory here, but I believe this is actually a $120 million project. Is there ways we can find within that budget to fund the cycle track?
So we have all the things that you see, and the changes and the revisions that we have made are included in the base project. These additions, like another thing we looked at is dedicated transit coming out of Kentucky onto northbound Lincoln, that kind of section there. So we're not precluding that. We have the lane and we can repurpose that in the future, but not a part of base project. So what you see is being added is what the project can absorb. These other ideas to where we moved into not precluding, making sure that we're standing ourselves up. We don't have to come back and redo based on our network needs. Those would be outside of the scope and not part of base project. So we did ask ourselves those questions, and what we could absorb, we did.
In some of those segment 4 conversations with federal and state partners, is it possible to introduce the conversation about some potential funding that would have gone to that being reallocated towards these components?
Nick, are you able to speak to that? So state and federal, are these agreements, Jake, or maybe you could give us a little bit more there?
Sorry, just to expand upon it, the discussion around segment 4 was, can we abandon this project, right? And with some appropriation having, at least my understanding, there's a lot of moving components on this project, so forgive me if I'm misunderstanding, but that there may have already been some appropriation for segment 4 or, planned appropriation. Is there the possibility of, in a conversation for what this project should look like for 2020, for the 2020s versus the 2000s, is there a conversation of some of that appropriation potentially going to, say, a cycle track or some of these additional facilities?
I think anything's possible with the discussions, but to Jen's point, we're making some big changes kind of midstream on this, and that's something we're very comfortable doing. Obviously, priority is going to be, let's make sure we deliver on what we've said here on there. But I think to your point, I think anything is possible. Not a lot of funding has been appropriated to that last segment on there, so we're not working with a whole lot, but conversations are all possible.
Yeah, assuming we're able to abandon, then the conversation of can we repurpose some of that funding? I think that's a good thought, something we can carry forward.
Great, thank you.
So yeah, Nemo is confirming no funding has been allocated to segment 4. Thank you for the clarification. No opportunity to reappropriate because no funding is in that space right now for segment 4. Thank you, Nemo.
But to Jen's point, there'll be a lot more funding opportunities here, and this becomes a more attractive potential grant recipient with how it's being designed now.
Yeah, new funding opportunities.
Other questions?
Looks like Brittany. Outside of the board. Okay.
Nanita, if you're able to add Brittany, I'm okay opening it to Brittany. I know she's been deeply involved upon this process, and we didn't have any public comment.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we
Okay.
can.
I just want to say thank you, but I also have a question. How far along is the art budget for the project? Is there still possibilities to open up to artists or different installations along this route?
Yeah, with a one.
Hey, Brittany, can you?
Okay, there we go. So 1% art. I wonder, it's a good question, Brittany. I don't have, Nemo is like our expert on the implementation side. And so understanding where in the project they're at for that selection. We do work with arts and venues. So we have the funding, right, as part of the project. Then arts and venues is the one that procures the artist and really does the advertisement for that work. We usually sit, like a Mike Harmer, a project manager, would sit on that selection committee to help to understand opportunities where we have space. But regarding your timing, like where are we exactly in that? I don't have that detailed. Nemo, do you have that? And could you drop that in the chat if you do? Just have we already coordinated with arts and venues on our 1% art fund?
Awesome.
Brittany, I will document that question, and we have more conversations scheduled with you. Oh,
Great. We are a touch over time. Thank you so much, Jen and David, for going through this. I'm really appreciative of all the effort that you took to listen to the community's concerns here. It is, you know, that's the work of true public servants. So thank you very much.
absolutely. Thanks for having us.
All right. With that being said, we need to jump over to committee report outs. Do we have a report from the Budget and or Policy Committee?
Real quick for budget, we'll have a meeting later this month. Emails out to this group on time and Zoom location.
Awesome. Thanks, Alan.
And from the policy committee, I'm speaking as the co-chair, the new co-chair with Jamie, who couldn't attend today. That was one of the things we accomplished last period. We suggested proposed members to the DDS committee, which we are looking forward to moving that forward as well. And there wasn't an awful lot of other significant discussion other than Jake, if you had anything real quick, but we expect to talk about Pena Boulevard 13th and 14th next meeting, and we'll talk a little bit about the response to the budget presentation. So that's on the agenda.
My only thing would be congratulations on your appointment as co-chair, Gary.
Oh, thanks.
Awesome. If we have no other committee report out items, do you want to jump over to the action items list here? We had issues on 13th and 14th Avenue. Joe attended the Council District 5 meeting related to this. Joe, do you have a brief report out? Sorry, I know we're pushing time.
Yeah, so basically we did meet, and it was a gathering of everybody. So the police and everything. So it was well attended. It was a well-run meeting. And it boiled down to that there are minor things being done, probably not enough for the neighborhood. And there is a lack of enforcement. They're just so shy of police officers that it's really hard to do the speed limits. There have been some improvements to the street. The neighbors are waiting to see that. One thing the neighbors did volunteer, there was some question whether they could park those vans, the radar vans. And they said, well, they can't park on public property. And about half the people along the street said, park on my property. We want to see that deterrent. So the police did come back and say they would try to do that and make the arrangements to do that. So I think it's moving. Of course, it moves very slowly. And I don't think the neighborhood was quite satisfied with everything. The other issue that came out was the Colfax rapid train, whatever it's called, and what that effect will have. So I wasn't too pleased, I think, with the thing that nobody really knows what's going to happen, which is probably true, but we really don't want to see more traffic on 13th and 14th. And we're not sure how the Colfax Avenue is going to kind of deal with that, or if anybody's really given it enough consideration. So I think we'd all like to see a little more consideration of what is planned for that. Hopefully the Colfax bus will be award winning and everybody will take it, but I don't think we're there yet. So I did do a little report, and we can send it into the committee to show what it was. But basically we got somewhere, but not really as far as we wanted to go.
Awesome. Thanks, Joe. I had a chance to attend that meeting too. And speeding's an issue when people are begging the city to park on their lawn, which is not something I've ever heard at a public meeting before. Cool. Thanks, Joe. Jonathan is still planning to connect with Samuel Como to discuss 311 tickets being closed with no resolution that aren't resolved yet. He's working on that. For our third item on our action items list, Nick was to make inquiries about public comment from Matt in the March meeting, and requires someone to dive in to see what other options are.
Yep. And so I met with Juan Garza, who in charge of our parking in that area, and got a little bit more background. You know, he's a gentleman that commenter had been working with on there. And ultimately, I think probably first pass is increased enforcement from our right-of-way enforcement agents on there. So I spoke with our director of right-of-way enforcement, and they'll be making some special visits to that area to ensure that kind of hopefully the issue that the commenter had brought to our attention is not occurring, or if it is, folks are getting tickets.
Awesome. Thanks, Nick. And then last two items here, but Jonathan will work on the nomination process for Denver Deserves Sidewalks. That has been completed. And the policy committee is taking a look at railway safety, and I believe meets tomorrow. And Lucia, I do see your hand raised.
I had put something in the Slack, regarding like the right-of-way stuff that the policy committee was working on. I had put in a 311 about some orange fencing that's been up for quite some time now, a couple years. On two actual different fences on two different blocks, I only got a response to one that DPD requested the fencing to keep off people. And I thought that was against the policy. And this is it's adjacent to a parking lot for Fentress Architects. There's no reason for there to be a fence there. I don't know what's going on. Does anyone from DOTI can speak to that? Why would a special request from DPD for something that is not allowed anywhere else?
I can't speak to what DPD requested, Lucia, but if you have emails or something like that, if you can send it to me, I can see what I can find out, certainly.
I will do that. Thank you very much.
Can't hear you, Jake.
How about now? Okay, cool. So I was feeling some sympathy for David and figured I'd join him. But with that being said, we are running a little over time, and I want to be sensitive to everyone's schedule. If you have any items that you'd like to add to the action items list, why don't you go ahead and send those as an email to me, and I'll make sure that we get them added for next month, and we'll incorporate it then. But thank you all for joining and staying a few minutes afterwards to make sure we can talk about some important topics. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Great meeting. Thanks, Jake. Well run.
Thanks.
See y'all in a month. Happy spring, y'all.